So, good morning to everybody. My name is Damiano Coato, and I'm a PhD student at both the Reykjavik University and the University of Padua. My PhD is focused on 3D printing applications in healthcare, and so this will be today's presentation topic. And the presentation is entitled Digital and Synthetic Twins to Improve the Evaluation of Diseases. So, before explaining what digital or a synthetic twin is, I would like to start with a simple question. What is the best way to truly understand how a human tissue behaves in both healthy and pathological conditions? So the best case scenario, this will be having direct access to the specimen, so to measure it, test it, to touch it. But this is not always possible because biological tissues are very hard to obtain, and of course, legal and ethical issues come into play. So on top of this, there is also, for example, high variability between patients and within the same patient. There is also, for example, in the mechanical tests, low reproducibility and low standardization. So biological sample is, of course, the gold standard, but lack of different things. So, for example, there are biosafety risk, limited control over boundary conditions, and etc. A possible solution could be, for example, the use of animal specimens, but also in this case, the animal tissue is not always representative of human tissue. And also, there are still ethical and legal issues present and a high variability between species. So that is why nowadays, the digital twins are used more and more. A digital twin is basically a virtual model of an organ or tissue that can simulate the function under diverse conditions. The synthetic twin help us to, the digital twin, sorry, help us to overcome different limitations. For example, the biosafety, the variability, the control of properties, etc. But it is still missing something. In this case, we are missing a physical counterpart to experimental validate our results. So, as I wrote there, it's perfect to understand what could happen, but it's not very good in verify what happens in reality. The solution in our case is the synthetic twin, which is a new generation of 3D printed anatomical models that combine both the anatomical realism and biomechanical fidelity. So you might say, we already have 3D printed anatomical models, right? But what's new here? The novelty lies in the mechanical properties of the materials we use, which are called the digital anatomy materials. We take the base materials and we push them one step further by combining them in different combinations. So using soft and rigid materials, combine them and create a new blend that has, for example, intermediate properties. And we can also work in the microstructure of these materials. So, for example, by embedding microfibers, by controlling the porosity, or inserting gradual transitions between one material to another. The work I'm gonna show you today is focused on cartilage. And in particular, the aim of this study was to characterize and analyze multi-material fiber-reinforced samples in order to replicate the native architecture of cartilage. As some of you already know, the cartilage is structured into multi-layers. So from the outer layers, we have the superficial layer, which has fibers parallel to the surface. Then there is the middle layer, in which the fibers are oriented randomically. And in the deepest part, the deep layer, where the fibers are perpendicular to the joint surface. And each of these layers have unique composition and properties that influences the overall behavior of the cartilage. So this is the general workflow. And with this idea in mind, with this scheme in mind, we started to conceptualize our sample. First, we started from the materials. I will not go into details into this because we don't have time, but what you need to know is that we performed a lot of mechanical tests to characterize the properties of these materials, and we published different studies. And in this case, we selected a blend, a 50% blend of two materials that were well fitted for this application. For the fiber design, we created these cubic samples for compression. So one without the fibers and the other ones for each configuration. And since in the cartilage, all these layers are combined into a single tissue, we also created a multi-layer construct. The white layers you see in there are just transition layers. We added to have a smoother transition between one material to another and to create a gradual transition in the orientation of the fibers. Then there is the 3D printing part. So we printed out this material with the some advanced materials I mentioned. In particular, the matrix was printed with some soft materials, and while the fibers were printed with more rigid material. The printer we used is from the company Stratasys, and is a J850 digital anatomy printer. Then we characterize all the samples. In this case, using the uniaxial compression and tensile tests. And along with it, we enriched the standard procedure by using the digital image correlation technology, which is basically an image-based technique that record the movements of a ink pattern sprayed before the test. And for example, the image digital correlation helped us to retrieve some additional information from just one single test, for example, for the lateral expansion or shrinking of the samples. And at the end, of course, the data analysis of the experimental data. And I also inserted the FEM analysis because we are currently working on the finite element simulation, so the digital twin I told you before. So some results. As you can see from the graph on your right, which is a stress strain graph, we can see that every configuration, every sample has a very distinct behavior. With the multi-layer construct reaching the highest compressive modulus. What's interesting here is that the superficial and the middle layer placed themselves into the physical range of properties of native cartilage. And also here you can see a table with the Poisson modulus, which is a modulus based on the lateral expansion of the sample during decompression. And with all of them, we were able to compare ourselves with literature results present online. And on your right, we have I reported the digital image correlation results, highlighting the fact that we are able to distinguish between the different layers on the multi-layer layer sample. So this technique was very, very precise. So yeah, just to go as fast as possible. I just wanted to highlight the fact that this synthetic twin has a very high potentials because we can create sustainable, tunable, and reproducible 3D printed analogs of native tissues. And we can use them, for example, in the biomechanics research to study diseases, to see how a pathology affects the behavior of the tissue. We can help the surgeons, for example, in the planning and the training, and diagnostics, etc. So a future work we are currently working on is as I said before, this FEM analysis, because the best way to do that is to combine different approaches. So using the synthetic twin and combine with a digital twin. We don't want to exclude the experimental validation or the virtual part of it. Just to conclude, the synthetic twin is not just a shape that looks like an organ, but it's a physical model that behaves like one. So yeah, that's it. Thank you very much.